My father's unexpected illness left me to inherit the throne at the young age of 16. And for the past 4 years, I have to prove time and again that I was not a weak and defenseless child. Naturally, it involved many men and their champions challenging me for the throne. I had the best teachers and weapons, but it was the drive to prove my enemies and detractors wrong that truly pushed me to excel at this. But while many did so out of greed and desire for power, there were some that did so because they believed me unjust or unfit. Once I defeated them, I would hear out their concerns and grievances. My father taught me to be strict but not cruel, and if my people believed I was not doing my duties well, it was only right to hear them out. But today's challenger was an odd one. Their armor was an odd patchwork of materials: steel, stone, and even enchanted wood. I would have praised the blacksmith's ability to combine those materials together, if it didn't look so unfinished and unsettling. Not a single piece of armor fit together. That's how it looked from my perspective, at the very least. Odds and ends of every piece were simply mashed together as if someone ripped them off the complete sets and melted them into one thing. Even their sword was the same. It was a chunk of stone with metal and gemstones, messily attached to the blade and wooden handle. "Speak now, O brave challenger." I get up from my throne, hand reaching for my own blade. "What brings you here today? What drives you to raise your sword against your king?" The silent charge was their answer. I answer it with a swing of my own. My blessed steel cuts through their armor and then flesh, cutting off their arm down from the shoulder. My fears of the challenger being some sort of demon or monster are proven false when I see blood gushing from the wound. The blood and the pain don't stop the challenger from grabbing their sword with their healthy limb and swinging at my head. But it is clear that this is not their dominant arm, as the swing is too clumsy and weak to kill me. They manage to graze my cheek and draw a droplet of blood. I, in turn, have enough space to slash them down from shoulder to their hip. "Surrender now," I speak with my blade to their throat. "Do so, and I shall hear out your grievances and goals." The challenger remains silent. For a moment I wonder if they might be incapable of speech. But then the challenger laughs. Another swing ends the laughter. "Take the body away," I order the guards. "Identify who it is beneath the armor and report to me once done." I was about to resume my other duties when the door to my throne room opened once again. Strangely, one of the guards announced that it was today's challenger. I was about to correct him that I was done for today. And then, I saw the dead challenger standing before me. Same armor, same weapon, same air to them as they stood before me. I would have it was a jest, if it weren't for the sudden feeling of unease that always came to me in crucial moments. I had no evidence or reason to believe it was the same person that I have just cut down. But somehow, I knew it was them. "What is the meaning of this?" I asked. "Reveal your face, challenger." And just like mere moments ago, the challenger only responds with an attack. Their charge only further confirms my suspicions, as they move identical to how they had done before. They charge, they lose an arm, they die. They laugh. "Your Majesty, today's challenger has arrived." I look at my guard, trying to detect some hint of spell or deceit, but all I see is the same loyal man that has served me my entire life. He bows out of the room and leaves me alone with the challenger once again. I welcome the challenger, as they had done the first time. It, for this creature cannot be considered a man at this point, charges, and it dies in 3 swings as before, but now it laughs at me no matter what I say, or how I kill it. For a moment I considered the possibility it was all just a dream. Then I remembered how the creature managed to cut my face when we first thought. The wound was still there for me as proof. And so I continued to fight it. To pass the boredom, I took the chance to practice all the moves I have learned over my long life. I have studied under my father and the best warriors in the kingdom, and every time I struck down the monster I thanked those great men for granting me their knowledge and time. I have no idea how many times I have slain the same warrior, or how much time has passed. The sun's light was still as bright as it was in the morning, and my Gar seemed as well rested as he was when I first greeted him today. Even my own body didn't feel nearly as tired as it should have been. The same can be said of my mind, however. "Who are you?" I repeated the same question for 100th or perhaps even 1,000th time. "Answer me, monster!" It doesn't answer. Of course it doesn't. Instead, it charges at me again. I deliver the same swing of my blade that has entered the creature time and again. Only now, the blade doesn't cut for its flesh, or its armor. Instead, my sword bounces off the metal and falls out of my hand. I have gone through this fight over 1,000 times now, and yet in this very moment my mind is suddenly emptied as the creature stabs its blade from my shoulder. The pain rips through the fog of exhaustion clouding my mind. I barely had a moment to kick the warrior away before it tore from my arm from the shoulder down. I managed to pick up my sword just in time to block its next strike. My bones rattle, and I am brought down to my knees by the sheer force and speed of the attack. "You! Just what are you?" It doesn't answer me. Of course it doesn't. Instead, the challenger kicks me in the stomach and sends me sprawling on the ground like a runt. I barely roll out of the way of its sword, avoiding the heavy stone by a hair's breadth. It wasn't just the challenger's armor and weapon that grew stronger. The damn creature also moved differently from before. In the 1,000 fights that I had won today, it was fast but uncoordinated. The thing moved like a puppet, its motions too telegraphed and too clumsy to be of any danger. It moved with purpose and plan now. Not a single motion was wasted. Even when I dodged, I found myself pressed into the corner, or stumbling over the debris that appeared seemingly out of nowhere. I couldn't get a moment to breathe, much less strike back. Every opening was a trap. Every attempt to get close ended in me earning another wound. And every time the damn thing cut my flesh, it laughed. And for reasons unknown, that laughter ate away at me worse than any of its strikes. Our fight continued on. With every strike, the monster grew stronger and faster. It also grew more vicious and cruel as it started to play with me, instead of trying to kill me. I accepted that I couldn't beat this monster. Every technique and move I learned under my father and his men, they were all powerless against this creature. Every strategy and plan I have learned by studying our kingdom's archives, none of them could work against this monster. If I fought as the king of Arolis, I would die. The only way to win and survive was by abandoning all that I knew about fighting. I abandoned the form and grace. I gave up on fancy moves and beautiful strikes. I threw away my pride and love for the history behind my blade and armor. And I fought. When it charged, I tore off my royal mantle. It was made of the finest silks and gifted to my great ancestor by their defeated enemy as a tribute. But now, I used it to slow the challenger down, throwing it at the creature to obscure its vision and block its path. The silk wrapped around the challenger's head. I grabbed onto it and pulled, further trapping its head in the finest of silks. I moved to its back and grabbed onto the two ends of the mantle before wrapping those around its throat. Trying to choke your opponent off was a dirty and cowardly move, but I would take the shame if I could live to feel it. It was the first I heard the creature make a sound, and it was the only warning I got before the monster tossed me away. My armor was dented, but it saved me from dying as I was slammed into the wall. I watched the monster struggle to remove the mantle covering its head before it gave up. It chased after me. Even with its vision completely blocked, I still made enough sound for the monster to find me. But it was slower now. Its strikers were less precise too. But it wasn't enough for me to kill this thing. I abandoned my armor next. It was far too damaged to protect me, and too noisy to not be detected by the monster. Throwing it as far as I could to distract the creature, I stuck to observing it as it raged through the room. It didn't have a strict pattern of attacks I could capitalize on, but I did notice something about his sword. Whenever he struck it too hard, a few crystals in the blades sparked, That gave me an idea. Like a rat, I moved across the room as quietly as I could. I spotted the areas where the monster struck its blade against the floor or the walls the hardest. As expected, there were a few chunks of the rocks of the same color as the ones that created sparks. I gathered as many as I could before getting to the end of the room, as far away from the monster as possible. With what I had in mind, I needed all the distance I could get. The sound of me ripping my tunic alerted the creature. It rushed towards me, its heavy blade raised to cut me down in half. I fashioned a makeshift slingshot out of the long strip of fabric and launched one crystal after another. They had no effect on the creature until one of them finally hit just the right part of the stone. A single spark was enough to set my mantle ablaze. The fire burned bright and hot, and soon it spread to the wooden parts of the challenger's armor. Ah! I jumped out of the way as the monster crashed into the wall. It writhed and cried in pain as the fire tore away at their body. But I could tell it would get back up soon. It wasn't going to die from just a little fire, and neither would it die from my sword. The only thing that could possibly kill it had to be its own weapon. I grabbed the heavy blade that the monster dropped. Despite the almost crushing weight of it, the sword felt familiar. Welcoming, even. But I didn't have time or desire to ponder these feelings. I was not new to taking lives. It was part of being a king and a warrior in my own right. I always stuck to clean and quick kills, however. I was not a savage or a lowly animal to indulge in cruelty and murder. Or so I believed. Die! I almost didn't recognize my own voice. It sounded so primal and inhumane that for a second I mistook it for the creature's own roar. But it didn't feel wrong. It was liberating. I swung the monster's blade without restraint or grace. I didn't think of it as a weapon or a tool. In a way, this chunk of metal and stone and wood felt like an extension of myself now. I tore at the body of my downed enemy, ripping away at his armor and flesh with my new weapon. When it tried to reach for my hands, I cut them off. When it thrashed to try and shake me off, I stabbed the blade for its chest. And again, and again, and again, until it no longer moved. I slammed the blade for its heart to keep it in place. After all this time, I deserved to see its face. I knew that the fire would have probably reduced it to nothing but charred flesh and bones. But I still needed to see just who it was that drove me to such extremes. I removed my burnt-up mantle, and then I ripped away his helmet. I don't know what face I expected to greet me. I envisioned a demon, or a monster of sorts, and if it had to be a human, I pictured one of the many sorcerers that I have heard about from my men's reports. I certainly didn't expect to see my own face staring back at me. What in God's name? I stepped away from the body in shock and horror. The challenger? No. The other me rose from the ground in turn. God has nothing to do with this. His voice was identical to mine. I shouldn't have been surprised, and yet I was. Well, not our God, at least. And there was the laughter again, but it was no longer mocking me. Instead, it was a pained and exhausted sound. "What is going on?" I asked, as I grabbed onto the hilt of the sword. It seemed to be the right thing, as the other man smiled. "Just who or what are you?" The other man smiled. "I am you." "Lies!" I brought my sword to the imposter's throat. "I am tired of these games of yours. Whoever you are, I hope it was worth losing your life over." Before I could behead the imposter, he pressed his 2 fingers against my head. In an instant, I was all alone once again, standing at the ruins of my palace. "What is this?" No, not just my palace. Wherever I looked, I found nothing but destruction and death. The skies were black with smoke. The air was heavy with rot and decay. I could hear neither humans nor birds. In fact, I couldn't hear anything at all. It was as if the life itself was afraid of making a sound. This had to be an illusion, or some twisted nightmare. What you see before you is very much real. It was my voice, or rather, the voice of my imposter. It can't be real, I protested. This is just another game of yours, I am sure. It is your future. Our future. No, it couldn't be. Denial will not change our fate. Only action will. He had to be lying. I knew I was not a perfect king, but I always did right by my subjects. This couldn't be my future or the future of my people. What could have possibly led to all of this? I shouted into nothing. What mistakes do I make that doom my people? What manner of sin do I have that leads to this horror? Complacency. What? We grew up on the tales of how great our kingdom is. We were taught to believe that we have achieved everything that we could and that our way was absolute and perfect. We allowed our wealth and power to make us weak and stagnant. And while we rested on our laurels, our enemies continued to challenge themselves. They looked for new and greater sources of power. They changed and adapted to the world as it evolved. And soon, they were rewarded for this. 3 figures rose from the ground near me. One made of stone, another of metal, and the last one of wood. The same materials as the armor the other me wore today. The Empire of Stone, the Nation of Steel, the Forest Realm. They found the sources of power beyond a mortal man's understanding. They made their deals with the beings beyond our realms, and reached the power that no other kingdom could rival. We clung to our ideals and beliefs for as long as we could, but eventually we fell, just as everyone else had. And while the Great Three continue to grow and advance, we are but a footnote, if not a distant and dying memory. But it doesn't have to be our fate. We can change it. You can change it. I looked at the burning remains of my kingdom. I thought of all the people in it that I cared about, and imagined them buried underneath these ruins. Why fight me? I asked. Why not just show me this and tell me what I need to do differently? Because this wouldn't change anything. I could have shown you every mistake I made and every failure I suffered. I could guide you through every single move that you need to make to secure our future. But it would be a temporary solution. Sooner or later, your knowledge of the future would no longer be useful. And then you would return to your rigid and complacent ways. No. To truly change our fate, you must change yourself entirely. If you stuck to the ways taught by our father and his men, you would be dead, and I would accept that we were never capable of changing. But you didn't. You abandoned things that held you back and remade yourself in the middle of the fight. You defeated me and earned the right to create a better world for our kingdom and our people. But this is only the first step. The 3 figures fell into dust before fusing back into the other me. Your enemies are already amassing power and resources, and in 1 year, they will launch their first attack on you and your allies. The other me explained. In many ways, you are already under attack. You just don't know it yet. He handed me his sword. You'd want me to strike you down? No, I don't want that. But such were the conditions of our meeting. He chuckled. I was allowed to come back to warn you and test you. But I cannot give you anything more than that, I am afraid. No magical gifts or special instructions. All I had was this one lesson for my future self. Now strike me down and end this challenge, he said. You have a lot of work ahead of you. I swing down my blade. The other me doesn't bleed. Instead, he simply fades away into nothing. In a blink of an eye, I am back in my throne room. My armor and mantle are intact, but feel far too heavy. Your Majesty, the guard asks, as I exit the throne room without them. Where are you heading off to like this? To the training grounds, I answer. Then to the library, then to the guild, and then... My mind was racing with ideas. There was just far too much to learn in too little of time. But the future me challenged me today to see if I was worthy enough to be a king. And just like with the other challenges before, I was not going to back down from it.